morning fog clung to Seattle's skyline like a gentle embrace as Sophia Mitchell hurried down Pine Street, her worn leather briefcase bouncing against her hip with each determined step. She had exactly 12 minutes to reach the construction site before the morning meeting began. And her boss, Mr. Henderson, had already made it clear that punctuality was not optional for the newest member of their engineering team. Her coffee cup, filled to the brim with the darkest roast she could afford from the corner cafe, steamed in the crisp October air. Sophia had been surviving on caffeine and determination for the past 3 months since landing. Her dream job as a civil engineer with Cascade Construction, fresh out of university with a mountain of student debt and dreams bigger than her tiny studio apartment. She was finally living the life she had worked so hard to achieve. The construction site loomed ahead, a symphony of steel beams and concrete that would soon become a 40-story mixed-use building. Sophia felt the familiar thrill of excitement as she imagined the structure taking shape, knowing that her calculations and designs would help create something lasting and beautiful in this corner of the city. As she rounded the corner of 4th Avenue, checking her watch one more time, Sophia didn't notice the sleek black sedan pulling up to the curb just ahead of her. She was too focused on reviewing her notes for the meeting, mentally rehearsing the presentation she would give about the foundation reinforcements. The car door opened just as Sophia reached the sidewalk directly beside it. She was moving too fast, her mind too preoccupied with structural load calculations to react in time. The collision was inevitable. Sophia crashed directly into a tall figure emerging from the sedan, her coffee cup flying from her hands in a perfect arc that seemed to defy gravity for one suspended moment, before gravity claimed its victory. The scalding liquid splashed across an impeccably tailored charcoal suit, seeping into what appeared to be the finest Italian wool. "Oh no, oh no, oh no," Sophia gasped, dropping her briefcase as she frantically patted at the coffee stains with her hands, which only seemed to make the situation worse. "I am so incredibly sorry. I was rushing and I wasn't looking, and your suit is probably worth more than my car payment, and I'm just making it worse. Aren't I?" The man she had crashed into stood perfectly still for a moment, looking down at his coffee-soaked jacket with an expression that Sophia couldn't quite read. She finally dared to look up at his face and felt her breath catch in her throat. He was undeniably handsome in the way that successful men often were, with sharp cheekbones and intelligent dark eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. His dark brown hair was perfectly styled despite the morning's mishap, and even covered in coffee. He possessed an air of quiet confidence that made Sophia acutely aware of her own rumpled appearance. "Miss," he said, and his voice was surprisingly warm, with just a hint of amusement threading through the formal tone. "I think you can stop trying to dry clean my suit with your hands now." Sophia immediately jerked her hands back, realizing with horror that she had been touching this stranger's chest while babbling apologies. Her cheeks burned with embarrassment as she bent to retrieve her briefcase, which had spilled open during the collision, scattering her carefully organized papers across the sidewalk. "Let me help you with that," the man said, crouching down to gather the scattered documents. As he handed them back to her, his eyes caught on the technical drawings and engineering specifications. "These are fascinating blueprints. Are you working on the Cascade project across the street?" Sophia nodded mutely, still too mortified to form coherent sentences. She watched as he studied one of her foundation designs with what appeared to be genuine interest rather than polite curiosity. "This reinforcement pattern is quite innovative," he continued, pointing to a section of her drawing. "Using this configuration should increase the building's seismic resistance by at least 15% over traditional methods." "You know about structural engineering?" Sophia asked, surprised enough to forget her embarrassment momentarily. A smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "I know enough to recognize exceptional work when I see it." He stood up, extending his hand to her. Daniel Richardson. The name hit Sophia like another collision. Daniel Richardson, the tech entrepreneur whose company had revolutionized sustainable building materials. Daniel Richardson, whose face had graced the cover of Business Week just last month. Daniel Richardson, whose net worth was probably more than the GDP of small countries, and she had just dumped coffee all over him. "You're Daniel Richardson?" she said weakly, shaking his offered hand with fingers that trembled slightly. "The Daniel Richardson, the very one," he confirmed, still smiling. "And you are?" "Sophia Mitchell," she managed. "I'm a civil engineer with Cascade Construction. And I just ruined your very expensive suit on what is probably already turning out to be a terrible day for you." Daniel glanced down at his coffee-stained jacket, and then back at her, his smile widening. "Actually, Miss Mitchell, this is turning out to be the most interesting morning I've had in months." Before Sophia could respond, her phone buzzed with a text message. She glanced at it and felt her heart sink. Henderson was looking for her, and the meeting was starting in 3 minutes. "I have to go," she said reluctantly, shouldering her briefcase. "But please, send me the dry cleaning bill, or the replacement cost, or whatever this costs. I take full responsibility for destroying your morning." "What if I told you that you hadn't destroyed anything?" Daniel asked, pulling out his business card with movements that seemed deliberately slow. "What if I told you that you might have just made my day considerably better?" Sophia stared at the elegant card he held out to her, not quite daring to believe what his tone seemed to suggest. "I don't understand. I've been looking for someone with your particular combination of technical skill and innovative thinking," Daniel said. "Someone who isn't afraid to challenge conventional approaches to sustainable construction. Someone who, perhaps, might be interested in working on projects that could change how we build cities. Are you offering me a job?" Sophia asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm offering you a conversation," Daniel replied. "But it might lead to something much more significant than either of us expects." Sophia's phone buzzed again, more insistently this time. Henderson was definitely looking for her now, and she could practically hear his disapproving voice through the text message. "I really have to go," she said, reluctantly taking the business card. "But I'll call you. I mean, if you're serious about this conversation?" "I'm always serious about conversations that matter," Daniel said. As Sophia turned to hurry toward the construction site, he called after her. "Miss Mitchell. For what it's worth, I think that suit needed coffee stains. It was getting far too comfortable." Sophia paused and looked back at him. This impossibly confident man who had just turned her most embarrassing moment into what felt like an opportunity. He was watching her with an expression that suggested he found her infinitely more interesting than his ruined clothes. "Thank you," she called back, though she wasn't entirely sure what she was thanking him for, as she finally reached the construction site gates. Sophia realized she was smiling despite the morning's chaos. In her hand, Daniel Richardson's business card felt like a small piece of possibility. Warm and promising against her palm, she had no idea that 12 minutes and one spilled. Coffee had just changed the trajectory of her entire life. But somewhere in the back of her mind, as she hurried to her meeting with Henderson's inevitable disapproval waiting, Sophia felt the stirring of something that might have been hope. Behind her, Daniel Richardson stood beside his coffee-stained sedan, watching until she disappeared into the construction site. For the first time in months, he found himself genuinely curious about what tomorrow might bring. The morning fog was beginning to lift from the city, and the day suddenly felt full of unexpected possibilities. 3 days had passed since the coffee incident, and Sophia had stared at Daniel Richardson's business card so many times she could have sketched it from memory. The elegant cardstock sat on her small kitchen table like a question mark, challenging her to be brave enough to make the call that could change everything. Her cramped studio apartment felt even smaller than usual as she paced. Between the kitchenette and her makeshift office corner, where her laptop sat, surrounded by stacks of engineering textbooks and half-finished project proposals. The morning light filtering through her single window illuminated the contrast between her modest life and the world that Daniel's business card represented. Finally, after rehearsing the conversation in her mind for the 100th time, Sophia picked up her phone and dialed the number. Her heart hammered against her ribs as the phone rang once, twice, 3 times. "Richardson Industries. This is Jennifer, Mr. Richardson's assistant. How may I help you?" "Hi, this is Sophia Mitchell. I'm the engineer who, had the coffee accident with Mr. Richardson on Monday. He gave me his card and said to call about a conversation." There was a brief pause. Then Jennifer's voice returned, noticeably warmer. "Oh yes, Miss Mitchell. Mr. Richardson has been expecting your call. He's asked me to schedule a meeting at your earliest convenience. Would tomorrow at 10 work for you? Sophia nearly dropped the phone. Daniel Richardson had been expecting her call. He had told his assistant about her. This was really happening. Tomorrow at 10 would be perfect, she managed to say, trying to sound professional despite the butterflies performing aerial stunts in her stomach. Wonderful. I'll email you the address and parking information. Oh, and Miss Mitchell, Mr. Richardson mentioned you should bring your portfolio, especially any work related to sustainable construction methods. After hanging up, Sophia spent the rest of the day organizing her best work, printing clean copies of her most innovative designs, and trying to calm her nerves. She had worked hard to get where she was. But meeting with someone like Daniel Richardson felt like stepping into an entirely different universe. The Richardson Industries building was a masterpiece of modern architecture, all glass and steel reaching toward the Seattle sky like a crystalline mountain. As Sophia rode the elevator to the 35th floor, she caught her reflection in the polished metal doors and smoothed down her best blazer, a navy blue piece she had bought for job interviews and worn to every important meeting since graduation. Jennifer, a poised woman in her 40s with kind eyes, greeted Sophia warmly and led her through an office space that looked like something from an architecture magazine. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered breathtaking views of the city and Puget Sound beyond, while sleek workstations buzzed with quiet productivity. Mr. Richardson is just finishing up a call, Jennifer said, gesturing to a comfortable seating area near the corner office. Can I get you anything? Coffee? Water? Tea. Sophia couldn't help but smile at the irony. Water would be great, thank you. I think I've caused enough trouble with coffee for 1 week. Jennifer laughed. Actually, Mr. Richardson has been drinking twice as much coffee since Monday. He says it reminds him of interesting mornings. Before Sophia could fully process what that might mean, the door to the corner office opened and Daniel emerged. Today he wore a crisp white shirt and dark slacks, looking every bit the successful executive she had expected when she first learned his identity. But when he smiled at her, the same warmth from their sidewalk encounter was there, making her feel less like a nervous job applicant and more like someone he was genuinely pleased to see. Miss Mitchell, he said, extending his hand. Thank you for calling. I was hoping our conversation on Monday had intrigued you enough to follow up. It definitely did, Sophia replied, shaking his hand and noting that his grip was firm and warm. Though I have to admit, I'm still not entirely sure what kind of conversation you had in mind. Daniel gestured toward his office. The kind that might change how we think about building the cities of the future. Shall we? His office was stunning but not ostentatious, with clean lines and carefully chosen art that spoke of refined taste rather than flashy wealth. A conference table sat near the windows, already set up with what appeared to be architectural models and technical drawings. Before we talk about why you're here, Daniel said, settling into a chair across from her, tell me about your background. What drew you to engineering? Sophia found herself relaxing as she told him about growing up in Chicago, the daughter of a high school math teacher and a nurse. She described her fascination with how buildings stood up, how bridges carried impossible loads, how human ingenuity could create structures that defied natural limitations. I used to spend hours building with blocks as a kid, she said, surprised by how easy it was to talk to him. My parents thought I might become an architect, but I was more interested in the bones of buildings than their skin. I wanted to understand the hidden systems that made everything possible. Daniel listened with the focused attention of someone accustomed to evaluating ideas and people. And sustainable construction? When did that become important to you? During my 3rd year of university, Sophia replied. I took an environmental engineering course almost by accident to fill an elective requirement. But learning about how construction impacts climate change, how much waste we generate, how much energy buildings consume, it changed everything for me. I realized that engineers have a responsibility to build better, not just bigger. Show me your work, Daniel said. And something in his voice suggested this was the real beginning of their conversation. Sophia opened her portfolio with hands that were steadier than she had expected. She walked him through her senior project, designed for low-income housing that used recycled materials and passive solar heating. She showed him her ideas for modular construction systems that could reduce waste in construction time, She explained her theories about biomimetic design, structures inspired by natural systems that were both stronger and more efficient than traditional approaches. Daniel asked questions that demonstrated not just politeness, but genuine understanding. He pushed her to explain her reasoning, challenged her assumptions, and made suggestions that revealed his own deep knowledge of construction and materials science. "This is impressive work," he said finally, studying her design for a carbon-negative concrete alternative. "But I imagine it's been difficult to find applications for these ideas in traditional construction projects." Sophia nodded ruefully. "Most firms are focused on proven methods and familiar materials. Innovation takes time and money, and both are usually in short supply. I've been lucky to work on some interesting projects at Cascade, but nothing that really pushes boundaries." Daniel leaned back in his chair, regarding her with an expression she couldn't quite read. "What if I told you I'm planning a project that would not only push boundaries, but potentially redefine them entirely? A project that needs someone with exactly your combination of technical skill and innovative thinking." "I'd say that sounds too good to be true," Sophia admitted. Daniel stood and walked to the window, gesturing for her to join him. From this height, Seattle spread out below them like a living map. All glass and concrete and human ambition reaching toward the sky. "See that lot there?" he said, pointing to a cleared area about 6 blocks away. 15 acres in the heart of the city, currently empty, but zoned for mixed-use development. I've been planning something special for that space for the past 2 years. He moved to the conference table and unveiled one of the architectural models. Sophia's breath caught as she saw what he had envisioned. A complex of interconnected buildings that seemed to grow from the earth rather than being imposed upon it. Gardens cascaded down terrace levels, while solar collectors and wind generators were integrated so seamlessly into the design that they became part of its aesthetic appeal. "It's called the Cascade Green Complex," Daniel explained. "Residential units, commercial spaces, offices, and community areas, all designed to be completely carbon neutral and largely self-sufficient. The buildings would generate their own energy, process their own waste, even grow food for the residents and businesses inside." Sophia walked around the model, studying the elegant curves and interconnected systems. "This is incredible," she breathed. "The engineering challenges alone must be staggering." "They are," Daniel agreed, "which is why I need someone who sees challenges as opportunities rather than obstacles. Someone who understands that the most important structures we build aren't just shelters, but models for how humanity can live sustainably in an urban environment." He paused, watching her reaction carefully. "I'm offering you the position of lead engineer on this project, Sophia. Full creative control over the structural and systems design. A budget that will let you explore any innovation you think might work, and a timeline that prioritizes doing it right over doing it fast." Sophia felt the world tilt slightly, as if the building itself had shifted under her feet. "Mr. Richardson, I've been working as an engineer for exactly 3 months. I don't have the experience for something like this." "You have something more valuable than experience," he replied. "You have vision. You see possibilities where others see problems, and you're not constrained by the assumption that things have to be done the way they've always been done." She looked at the model again, imagining the complex teeming with life, a vertical ecosystem that proved sustainable living could be both practical and beautiful. Then she thought about her tiny apartment, her student loans, her current job where innovation was discouraged and conformity was rewarded. "What about Cascade Construction?" she asked. "I can't just abandon my current position without proper notice." 2 weeks' notice is standard," Daniel said, "and I'm prepared to offer you a salary that will eliminate any financial concerns you might have about making the transition." When he mentioned the figure, Sophia had to sit down. It was more than double what she was making at Cascade, enough to pay off her student loans within 2 years instead of 20. "This is overwhelming," she admitted. "Yesterday, I was worried about getting to meetings on time. Today, you're offering me the chance to redesign urban living." Daniel sat across from her again, his expression serious but kind. "I understand this is a big decision. Take the time you need to think about it." "But Sophia, I want you to know that I'm not offering you this position because I feel sorry for you or because I'm trying to be charitable. I'm offering it because I believe you're exactly the right person for this job. How can you be so sure? She asked. Because 3 days ago, you turned a minor accident into a conversation about structural innovation, he replied. Because you see beauty in load-bearing calculations and poetry in sustainable design. And because when you look at that model, your eyes light up with the same excitement I felt when I first imagined what we could build together. The word together hung in the air between them, carrying implications that went beyond professional collaboration. Sophia found herself studying Daniel's face, noting the way his eyes crinkled slightly when he smiled. The way his presence seemed to fill the room without overwhelming it. I need to think about this, she said finally. Of course, he replied, standing as she gathered her portfolio. Take all the time you need. But while you're thinking, remember that the most important buildings are the ones that haven't been built yet. And the most important choices are the ones that scare us a little. As Sophia rode the elevator down from the 35th floor, her reflection in the polished doors showed a woman who looked both terrified and exhilarated. In her bag, Daniel's detailed project proposal felt like a treasure map leading to a future she had never dared to imagine. Outside, Seattle's skyline stretched toward the afternoon sun. All those buildings representing someone's vision made manifest in steel and stone. For the first time since graduation, Sophia allowed herself to dream about adding her own mark to that horizon. And somewhere in the back of her mind, she couldn't stop thinking about the way Daniel had said the word together, as if they were already partners in something much larger than architecture 6 months later. Sophia stood on the observation deck of the half-completed Cascade Green Complex, watching the sun set over Seattle while construction lights began to twinkle to life across the project site. The building around her hummed with quiet activity even at this hour, as automated systems monitored air quality, tracked energy production, and adjusted environmental controls based on weather patterns and occupancy data. What had seemed impossible in Daniel's office model was now rising from the earth in glass, steel, and living systems. The first residential tower was nearly complete, its facades covered with vertical gardens that would help filter air and regulate temperature. Solar collectors disguised as architectural features caught the last rays of daylight, while hidden wind turbines converted the city's constant breezes into clean energy. Admiring your handiwork? Daniel's voice came from behind her, warm with affection that had grown deeper over months of late-night planning sessions and shared victories over engineering. Challenges that had seemed impossible, Sophia turned, smiling at the man who had become so much more than her boss over these past months. Our handiwork, she corrected, reaching for his hand as he joined her at the railing. Though I still can't quite believe it's real. The past 6 months had been a whirlwind of innovation and collaboration. Working with Daniel had pushed Sophia to excel in ways she had never imagined possible. He challenged her ideas without dismissing them, supported her wildest innovations while helping her refine them into practical solutions, and treated her as an equal partner in the most ambitious sustainable construction project ever attempted in the Pacific Northwest. More than that, he had become her closest friend and confidant. Their professional relationship had evolved naturally into something deeper as they spent long hours together, sharing takeout dinners while debugging building systems, celebrating breakthroughs over champagne in his office, and discovering that they shared not just a vision for sustainable architecture but a sense of humor, a love of old movies, and a tendency to lose track of time when discussing ideas that excited them. The City Planning Committee meets tomorrow, Daniel said, his arm slipping around her waist in a gesture that had become natural over the past month. Since they had finally acknowledged that their partnership extended far beyond professional collaboration, are you ready for their questions? Sophia leaned into his warmth, drawing strength from his presence as she always did when facing challenges. As ready as I can be. The numbers are solid. The environmental impact projections are better than anything comparable. And we're 6 months ahead of schedule despite all the innovations we've incorporated. But, Daniel prompted, hearing the uncertainty in her voice. But Councilwoman Peterson has been vocal about her skepticism regarding experimental construction methods. She's convinced that anything this innovative must be unsafe or impractical. And if she persuades the committee to delay our permits for the second phase, we'll lose momentum and probably some of our investors. Daniel turned her to face him, his hands gentle on her shoulders. Sophia, you've created something revolutionary here. This building doesn't just meet environmental standards, it exceeds them by margins that engineers said were impossible. The air inside is cleaner than the air outside. We're generating 30% more energy than we consume. The residents love living here, and the waiting list for units in the second phase is over 1,000 people long. I know, she said, looking out at the city lights beginning to sparkle in the gathering dusk. But knowing you've done good work and convincing skeptical politicians are two very different things. Then we'll convince them together, Daniel said, tilting her chin up so she had to meet his eyes. Just like we've solved every other challenge we've faced. The next morning, the city planning committee meeting was standing room only. News of the Cascade Green Complex had spread beyond Seattle's borders, attracting attention from environmental groups, architecture journalists, and urban planning experts from around the world. Sophia had spent the early morning hours reviewing her presentation one final time, checking and rechecking every statistic and projection. She wore her best suit, a charcoal gray ensemble that Daniel had helped her choose because it projected authority without being intimidating. As she sat at the presenter's table, her laptop and notes organized before her, she caught sight of Daniel in the gallery. He offered her an encouraging smile that steadied her nerves and reminded her why this project mattered so much. Councilwoman Peterson, a stern woman in her 60s with steel gray hair and skeptical eyes, called the meeting to order. Today we're reviewing the permit application for Phase 2 of the Cascade Green Complex. Ms. Mitchell, you have 30 minutes to present your case. Sophia stood, her heart racing, but her voice steady as she began. She walked the committee through the project's environmental innovations, explaining how biomimetic design principles had inspired structural solutions that were both stronger and more sustainable than traditional methods. She showed them energy production data, water recycling statistics, and air quality measurements that painted a picture of a building that gave back more to its environment than it took. Residents of Phase 1 report 20% lower utility bills despite living in larger spaces, she explained. Clicking through slides that showed happy families and sun-filled apartments surrounded by green walls and smart home systems, indoor air quality is consistently rated as excellent. And the community gardens on each floor have created a sense of neighborhood that's rare in urban housing. When she finished her presentation, the questions came quickly. Most were technical, focused on specific systems and long-term maintenance concerns. Sophia answered each one confidently, drawing on months of real-world data from the completed phase. Then Councilwoman Peterson leaned forward, her expression skeptical. Ms. Mitchell, this all sounds very impressive in theory, but you're essentially asking us to bet the city's reputation on experimental technology designed by someone. With less than a year of professional experience, how can we be sure these innovations won't fail catastrophically in 5 or 10 years? The room fell silent. Sophia felt the weight of every eye upon her, the skepticism of officials who had seen too many promising projects become expensive failures. For a moment, self-doubt crept in, whispering that Peterson was right, that she was too young and inexperienced for such responsibility. Then, she thought about the families living happily in Phase 1, about the children playing in rooftop gardens while breathing the cleanest air in the city, about the elderly residents who told her that their apartments felt like home in ways their previous housing never had. Councilwoman Peterson, Sophia said, her voice growing stronger with each word. You're absolutely right that innovation involves risk. Every building in this city was innovative when it was first constructed. The Space Needle was experimental. The floating bridges were experimental. The underground bus tunnel was experimental. She clicked to a slide showing the Seattle skyline from 100 years ago, then transitioned to the modern view. Our city exists because previous generations were willing to take calculated risks on new ideas. The Cascade Green Complex isn't just experimental technology. It's a proven system that's been operating successfully for 6 months, providing better living conditions while using fewer resources. Sophia paused, looking directly at Peterson. But more than that, it's a model for how cities can grow without destroying the environment that sustains them. Climate change isn't theoretical anymore. It's happening now, and we need solutions that work now. We can't afford to wait for someone else to take the first risk. The room was quiet for a moment. Then Councilman Rodriguez, who had been taking notes throughout her presentation, spoke up. What about replicability? If this model works, could other cities adopt similar approaches? That's exactly what we're hoping, Sophia replied, her confidence building. We've been documenting every aspect of the construction process, every innovation and lesson learned. The goal isn't just to build one successful project, but to create a template that can be adapted for different climates and communities around the world. The committee deliberated for less than 20 minutes before calling for a vote. One by one, they approved the permits for Phase 2, with even Councilwoman Peterson acknowledging that the project's success to date had addressed many of her concerns. As the meeting adjourned, Sophia was surrounded by reporters wanting interviews, investors interested in funding similar projects, and city officials congratulating her on her presentation. Through the crowd, she caught Daniel's eye and saw pride and something deeper shining in his expression. Later that evening, they celebrated on the rooftop garden of Phase 1. Surrounded by resident families enjoying the communal space that had become the heart of their vertical neighborhood. Children played on equipment made from recycled materials, while adults tended vegetables and raised beds that helped feed the building's restaurant. I'm proud of you, Daniel said. Pulling Sophia close as they watched the sun set over the city they were helping to reshape. Not just for winning today, but for everything you've accomplished. 6 months ago, you were worried about being late to meetings. Tonight, you're changing how the world thinks about urban living. 6 months ago, you were just the guy I dumped coffee on, Sophia replied, laughing at the memory. Now you're the man who believed in me enough to let me build my dreams. Our dreams, Daniel corrected, echoing her words from that first day on the observation deck. And this is just the beginning. Phase 2 will house another 500 families. The community center will serve the entire neighborhood, and the research data we're generating will help green building projects succeed all over the world. As summoned by their conversation about the future, a young girl from one of the resident families approached them shyly. Ms. Sophia, she said, holding out a drawing made with colored pencils. I made this for you. The drawing showed a tall building covered in green plants, solar panels that looked like flowers and windows that sparkled like gems. At the top, stick figures with big smiles represented the people who lived there. And at the bottom, the artist had written, "Thank you for making our home beautiful," in careful block letters. Sophia knelt down to the girl's level, accepting the drawing with hands that trembled slightly. This is the most beautiful thing anyone has ever given me, she said, meaning every word. What's your name? Emma, the girl replied. I want to be an engineer like you when I grow up, so I can make homes for people too. After Emma skipped back to her family, Sophia stood quietly for a moment, holding the drawing and thinking about all the changes that had brought her to this rooftop garden. A spilled cup of coffee had led to a conversation. A conversation had led to an opportunity. An opportunity had led to innovation, success, and love. What are you thinking about? Daniel asked softly. I'm thinking about how the best things in life come from accidents we turn into adventures, she replied, leaning against his shoulder as the lights of their building began to twinkle in the gathering darkness above them. The stars were barely visible through the city's glow, but the building around them hummed with life and possibility. In apartments throughout the complex, families were settling in for the evening in homes that breathed with them, adapted to their needs, and connected them to a community that proved sustainable living didn't mean sacrificing comfort or beauty. So, Daniel said, his voice carrying a note of anticipation that made Sophia look up at him curiously. Now that Phase 2 is approved and you're officially the most sought-after sustainable engineer in the Pacific Northwest, I have a question for you. What kind of question? She asked, though something in his expression made her pulse quicken. Daniel reached into his jacket pocket and withdrew a small velvet box. Dropping to one knee on the rooftop where their dreams had taken physical form around them, The kind of question about building something together that will last even longer than our greenest building. Sophia's hands flew to her mouth as he opened the box to reveal a ring that sparkled like captured starlight. But more beautiful than the diamond was the expression on Daniel's face. Open and vulnerable and full of love. "Sophia Mitchell," he said, his voice steady, despite the enormity of the moment. "You've taught me that the best foundations are built on trust, partnership, and shared vision. Will you marry me and help me build a life as innovative and sustainable as the buildings we designed together?" Through tears of joy, Sophia could see Emma and her family watching from across the garden, along with dozens of other residents who had quietly gathered to witness this moment. The building around them seemed to pulse with shared happiness, a vertical community celebrating love taking root in the soil of their dreams. "Yes," she whispered. Then louder, "Yes, yes. Absolutely yes," as Daniel slipped the ring onto her finger and kissed her under the stars barely visible above the city they were transforming. Sophia realized that her father had been right all those years ago. Engineers were like magicians who made impossible things stand up and endure. But the most impossible thing of all was love. And the strongest structures they would build together were the ones that existed in the space between two hearts committed to creating something beautiful and lasting in an imperfect world around them. The Cascade Green Complex settled into the rhythms of evening, its systems quietly working to create clean air, renewable energy, and sustainable community. And at its heart, two people who had found each other through accident and choice were planning the most important construction project of their lives, a future built on love, innovation, and the radical belief that tomorrow could be better than today.